Dr. Gallagher, I would like to start off with the announcement, if I may, at the very beginning.
Yes,
I
that's
don't
a
know if
good
you
idea.
want to cue me in or you just want me to go
I'll
on.
cue you.
Okay, great. Sounds
I'll
good.
wait a few minutes as people are entering. So
Yeah, you're right.
thanks for being here, Monica.
Absolutely. My
I feel
pleasure.
like you're part of the team now.
And I feel part of the family.
Good.
So it's wonderful.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We're right at 5 o'clock. I think we'll wait a minute or two for any late arrivals. So if you can just sit tight. We have about 16 attendees at this point, so we'll see if we have a few more.
Buenas noches a todos. Ya son las 5 en punto. Vamos a esperar a que ingresen más personas y después daremos comienzo a esta reunión.
Okay, I'm watching the attendee number, and it's like the way I always do this is like a popcorn maker, right? Like you see the popping, like the numbers go up a lot, and then when they stop going up a lot, you know the popcorn's done. Well, we're about there with the attendees, so I think we've kind of leveled off. So I think we'll get started. Want to say good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Gallagher. I'm the superintendent of schools. I think most of you probably know me. I should know how many community forums we've done. I want to say it's probably I'd say about 5, maybe a half dozen. And we're happy to do this one. The focus this time is just to update everyone on our progress for reopening, to talk about some of our next steps, and to think towards the future. So we're going to have a short presentation, and then the rest of the hour is set aside for comments and questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. I have with me my team, and I'm just going to go around the Zoom squares as I see them. They're arranged on my screen. So first, Monica is our interpreter. She works with the County Office of Education, and she's been coming to many of our meetings. We really appreciate her services and the services of the county office, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jeremy Nishihara is the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources and Information Systems. Dr. Tasha Dean is the Assistant Superintendent of Special Education and Student Services. Mala Ahuja is our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services. Aaliyah Wilson is our, thank you for the wave. Aaliyah Wilson is our Communications Coordinator. Jesus Romero, very good, Aaliyah. Jesus Romero is administrative assistant to the superintendent, so he's my right-hand person. Rob Smiley is our chief operations officer, and Lori Van Gogh is our chief financial officer. So with that, Monica, do you want to make the translation announcement?
Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Monica. I'll be the interpreter for this meeting. I will also repeat this instruction in Spanish. The Zoom interpretation feature will be used in this Zoom meeting for English and Spanish support. All participants must select their language of preference by clicking the language when the host turns on the interpretation feature. This is found in the world icon located on your feature panel. Interpretation for this meeting will be conducted simultaneously. Thank you for your attention and collaboration. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Mónica, yo soy la intérprete asignada para esta reunión. Se utilizará la función de interpretación de Zoom para soporte en inglés y en español. Todos los participantes de esta llamada deben seleccionar su idioma de preferencia, haciendo clic en el idioma correspondiente cuando el anfitrión active la función de interpretación. Dicha función se encuentra en el panel de herramientas en el icono del globo terráqueo. El modo de interpretación para esta reunión será el simultáneo. Gracias por su atención y colaboración.
Okay, thank you. So with that, Mr. Nishihara, if you can bring up our presentation. Thank you. So I sort of did this slide already. So this is our return to in-person webinar, or really community forum. So as I said, it's an opportunity for you to get information and to ask us questions. And Mr. Nishihara, if you can kind of go through the roadmap of our progress here.
Yes, Dr. Gallagher. So this, the next four slides are very similar to what we've been presenting over a series of board meetings to try and document the road of where we've come from and where we're heading on our road to returning in person. So we debuted this slide at last board meeting to kind of show the progression that we've made from the beginning of the year, where we launched our independent study program and our brand new virtual program. So two new modalities to try to address the challenges that we faced this year when we opened up in virtual school when given the COVID-19 pandemic. And you can kind of show that the road kind of goes up and down. We've had some bumps and downhills and uphills during this time, dealing with trying to provide support for students and meeting ever-changing safety guidelines. So moving down this road, just highlights that we covered last time at the board meeting was we spun up our staff COVID testing program in September. And then our first supervised learning groups to bring students back onto campus actually began on October 7th in 2020. A lot of our challenges this year where we were given flexibility in some regards for state and federal guidelines, but one of them that was not relaxed is our our needs for special education assessment. So a big thank you to Tasha and the special ed team for accomplishing that in the fall to try to meet our assessment needs, especially for our special education students. In addition, we had LPAC testing throughout the year as well. In this little line here shows kind of the break between 2020 and 2021. We were able to get going some after school programs for the middle school, especially, and that started on February 22nd. Then March 1st, vaccines became available to educators in tier, I believe we're 1B at the beginning of March. Then as we planned for our return in person, we then created a on-site in-person COVID testing for staff to try to bring the testing onto campuses since the employees would be returning in person. It made it harder for them to make it over to the two El Camino sites that we had for our partnership. And then here it kind of stacks up on each other, and I won't go too much into depth because everyone is probably well aware of our timeline, where on the 18th of March, Kinder First and SDC began. March 22nd, preschool started in-person sections. Then April 1st, second and third began. This past Monday on April 5th, the sixth grade in-person sections cohorts began at SMS and CMS. Today is February 8th. We had our fourth and fifth grade in-person sections beginning. And then immediately after break, our 7th and 8th grade in-person sections will begin at CMS and SMS here. You can kind of see between this point and here, we're careening a little bit toward the end of the last day of school. But shortly after the last day of school is our first day of in-person summer school that we were planning for on June 28th. And
You don't have to start over.
no, I will not start over. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And then the summer school program, 4 weeks, runs until July 23rd. And then this big banner here is our intention to return in person first day of school on August 18th.
So thanks for that summary, Mr. Nishihara. Let me just say something about August 18th, because I've gotten some questions about that. We've said really clearly that we will be returning for full in-person instruction on August 18th to the greatest extent that is allowable under the law. And then some people, understandably, people have questions like, well, does that mean, Zoom in the room, or does that, what does that mean? Like, is it going to be a regular bell schedule? Our intention is to do regular bell schedule. Think back to March 13th of 2020, right? So that's our intention. Now, will it look a little bit different? The differences, I would imagine, is I imagine kids will still be wearing face masks, probably teachers too. We'll still have a large number of safety protocols that we'll have to be following. But we are absolutely confident that on the first day of school, August 18th, we'll have normal school with the safety precautions that we'll need. Then the other question that I often get about that is, well, a good percentage, I don't know what that is going to be, but I'm sure a good percentage or a good number of members of our community will say, well, my kids aren't vaccinated yet, or they have underlying conditions, or whatever their concern is. What about us? And I can tell you that is one of the big focus areas now that we've have our return plan well established for the spring. That's one of the areas that we're really focusing on now, is how to leverage our independent study, how to leverage our the virtual school options that we've had for those families that don't feel like that they're comfortable returning for full in-person instruction as it was, again, I'll say, think March 13th, 2020. So that's a lot of our work right now. More of our work is summer school. We're inside of Ms. Ahuja is working hard on that right now with her teams, and Stanford. We have a good partnership with Stanford. That's just a matter of weeks away. There's a lot of work that we're doing right now to get ready for, as I said, summer school and then the first day of school. There's a lot to do, but we're very excited about it, especially as we see kids are returning to campus now. So with that, on to the next slide.
Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. This slide that I showed last week at the board meeting is exactly the same, because it covers the K and the first grade cohort and the second and third. So these numbers remain the same. So I'll just leave it up here for a second. And then today, these numbers have been updated as of today's return for fourth and fifth. So you can see the numbers here, in-person sections. And along that roadmap, I should have pointed out, is that we've been adjusting along the way, in the sense that when we first presented this information, for example, Lakewood only had one K section came in, but the school site has been working hard. So in addition to augmenting their supervised learning groups, they were able to get a K, I want to say a third and then a fifth section in person. And then an update here is that San Miguel, both in their neighborhood and their juntos, were able to offer an in-person hybrid section to augment the lower grades using their SLG plus model. And then Vargas, you can see, has 30 and 31. So then this slide here is the same again, because again, these numbers have the school, the two middle schools, they've entered their 2 async prep days for the launch on April 19th for the return of 7th and 8th grade. But this past Monday, we had 205 sixth graders in the cohorts for CMS and SMS return for their hybrid model. Then the last thing is like Dr. Gallagher just stated, we have our implemented our returning in-person timeline is also allowing us now to explore expanding our in-person opportunities. So you may have recalled back in January, February timeframe, we said the transitional kindergarten, given the same, the same constraints of trying to preserve existing rosters and meeting the needs of the in-person demands from the December survey, we said we're going to hold on transitional kindergarten, but I'm happy to report that we've been meeting with the transitional kindergarten teachers to try and see what kind of in-person options we can at least offer for our younger TK students to even introduce them to the school site as we prepare for summer school and the return for next year. This includes trying, though, to balance the fact of preserving the relationships that these students have with their TK teachers. We have only TK at 5 of our school sites, not all 8. So trying to balance all of those needs. In addition, we are upcoming into our spring trimester assessment window. So don't have a lot of information yet, but the TK teachers we're in discussion about trying to offer some additional in-person options while preserving their class structure right now. So that's one of those balancing act that we're trying to accomplish. And then our elementary PE, just to notify everyone that we have in-person times a requirement to offer in-person instruction in PE for 4th and 5th grade. Instructional minutes. And so we have 4 elementary PE teachers that have been supporting the virtual program. Now that our returning in person is in place, they are exploring ways to try to bring additional in-person opportunities for students at their elementary school sites, especially for 4th and 5th grade, as we move into the spring for a couple of reasons. One is to try to increase our in-person opportunities. And then the second really is to start trying things so as we prepare for the fall on how to run and meet our potential PE requirement minutes for elementary and 4th and 5th grade. I'm going to hand it off to Assistant Superintendent Ahuja to kind of cover the next 2 bullets.
Good evening. Thank you, Jeremy. So I'm just going to speak a little bit to really piggyback on what was mentioned about the elementary PE transitioning from virtual to in-person. The same considerations are being applied to our KLAS, which is Kids Learning After School program that is funded by a federal grant, the ACES grant, and that takes place at specific schools across the district. And we currently have a virtual program in place for several of the programs. This is all a balancing game. This has been, how do we serve students best? So in some cases, it has been in the supervised learning groups, all personnel, it was all hands on deck. Let's get as many students in person as possible. Now that we've managed to do that, students are coming back into the classrooms. It's expanding to, now how can we extend the school day? So that's our focus, and those are the conversations that are taking place about that program. And the other piece, just to mention a little bit, extending the middle school day is one way to look at it for 6th grade in particular, just trying to offer students more opportunities to be engaged in school. And really looking at ways on how best to do that. Each site is different. It's, again, a case of site-specific needs, number of students wishing to come back, number of staff available, and looking at how the numbers are growing, for the 6th grade and then for 7th and 8th as well, how we can expand not just the academic offerings, but also look at, the possibility of either some band practice or some sports conditioning or, other options. These are the things that really draw kids back to school. I'm not so sure it's always just the core academic classes that we know are so important, but it's also expanding those offerings to our students. I think I'm going to talk about summer school, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Dean to talk about the promotion piece. Summer school, like Dr. Gallagher mentioned in the beginning, is just a very exciting proposition for us to be able to come back in person. It can almost be like a rehearsal for what August 18th onwards is going to look like, because we're going to have the opportunity to serve students in person. We have a robust, dedicated staff that has signed on to be part of this program. We are in the throes of planning all the professional development, planning all the instruction that's going to take place, and also partnering with Stanford in a way that allows for the possibility of extending the school day and again extending the opportunities to students. So not only will they be able to participate in just the morning offerings that have been typically in place, but also possibly, maybe not at all sites, but at a few of the 5 sites that we're offering these summer school options, having an expanded day offering as well. Those are all, considerations that are in the works. So thank you. Dr. Dean, over to you. Thank you.
So much, Mr. Ahuja. So this next section is, you heard both Jeremy and Mala speak to being flexible and fluid during this time, and things constantly changing. And so we're living in the present, the future, and beyond. It's kind of how we are processing. And so as we talk about elementary and middle school promotion, that's also how we're processing that. We have been given some additional information from the California Department of Health, as well as the county, on some guidance, and we're looking at that. We're hoping to get more guidance as we move towards the end of April that would further inform our practices. But we are taking that information into consideration to see what might be possible, whether those possibilities include some in-person options or some virtual options or a blend of the two. But we are taking that information so that we can make the most informed choices, keeping in alliance with our responsibilities and goals around being flexible and also being safe at the same time. So we will continue to monitor that and bring additional details as we have them to the community about those particular areas. And then the other area we want to emphasize, as a school district, we have always emphasized the importance of social emotional learning for not only our students, but our families and our staff as well. And so we will continue to focus in on those particular aspects with support, coaching as needed, and also just programs, parent education, or whatever it might be in those particular areas. But in addition to that, for the last year and a half, prior to the pandemic, we had began to talk about being trauma informed in our practices, not only in our teaching, but also just in our access to our campuses. And so we know that with the pandemic, we will have more families and more students who have experienced some type of trauma during this period of time. And so it is our responsibility and our goal to be sure that we provide the best possible ideas, solutions, in order to welcome students and families back in and accept them where they are and be able to provide them some of the supports they need so that they can be successful academically and support the behavior and socio-emotional needs that they may have. So more to come in those areas, but they definitely will be a focus as we move forward. And with that, I'll turn it back to Dr. Gallagher.
There, had to unmute. So all of this, again, focuses on preparation for the full return on August 18th, 2021. And, you know, I am practicing saying that date specifically to be as unambiguous as I can be. And I ask the teams to say that. I ask our community to say that August 18th, we're coming back. And it's going to be, all the kids are coming back, and we're going to be safe. But it's going to be really exciting as well too. And everything we're doing now is in preparation for that. Summer school is a big piece of that. The implementation of our plans for in-person instruction that we've been doing throughout the spring are part of that. And also, as Mr. Nishihara noted, we've been steadily increasing our offerings as we've moved through. And Ms. Ahuja mentioned that as well, the idea of middle school. You know, once the kids are back, like now if we can extend it, we're working on that as well, even in this spring. So with that, that concludes our presentation. And Ms. Wilson will help us sort of moderating the comments and questions. If you have well, you're good at this, Ms. Wilson.
Certainly. So now's the time if you guys needed any clarification or if you had any comments or questions, if you could use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll take your comments in the order that we receive them. So we'll just give you a few minutes to use the raise hand feature. Looks like so far we have 5 hands raised. All right, so we have 7 hands raised so far. So first up, we have Mikhail Glazer, then Kristen Kurimoto, and then Asha number 3.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to ask if we can change a little bit the format. I know in the past when we had the board meetings, we would take, you guys would take the notes and write down the questions and answer them all at the end of the presentation, or at the end when everybody finished with their questions. And I would like to ask if it's possible to answer right after the question has been asked for each person.
Yeah, that's the format. That's the format we use in these forums.
Okay, great. So
Yeah.
this is the form that, okay, great. So back in November, we made a mistake, and I believe I'm talking for other parents as well, by filling out the survey and saying that we would like to go back in person with the teacher. I think there was a lot of confusion around it, and now we realize that we made a mistake. We went back to the schools and we would like to change that, and it's impossible. So I reached out to our principals at Cumberland, and she specifically told me that her hands are tight and my daughter is on the waiting list, but it doesn't look like we're gonna have a spot for her. So I would like to ask, how can we change that? How can we open another classroom for a 3rd grader? I know the list is long and there's a lot of kids in waiting list. And I reached out to the board and I got the response that there's not going to be a classroom open. So my first question is, how can we change that? The second question, how can we extend? So I have another son in 2nd grade that he was lucky enough to be get back to school because his teacher was back in school. And I would like to ask, how can we extend the time from 2.5 hours a day to a full day this year? It doesn't seem reasonable to have such a short day. By the time I'm dropping him and I'm dropping his older brother in the private schools, I need to pick him up at 10:30. I don't think there's a reason why not to extend it. And the third question I have is with regards to the summer schools. 2 of my children are with learning disability. I believe that we will be qualified. And I wanted to ask why it starts on June 28th and not right after the schools is over. The reason for that is a lot of families are waiting for the summers to have a summer vacations, and they're going out to different countries that require quarantines for 2 weeks. And by the time that they will finish the schools, it will be July 23rd, which would leave them with nothing on vacation if they have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So if it's possible to change the plan, I know I've been told a lot of the time you guys told us in the past that every single change will delay the plan. I really ask you to revisit that and make changes to accommodate a lot of families that would like to go on vacation and to have some time off for them at the end, or start it early. So that was 3 questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Nishihara, do you want to take the one about the first one, which was about,
Yeah, so I made a note. I guess in general, we're trying to utilize the state's prioritized students to fill out the next round of filling in person. So I know on that sheet, you might have noticed that there are some sections that are below. So we're doing that process now, because remember, the state has identified priority students for us, including English learners, McKinney, foster youth, etc. So we're really taking the time to try to make sure we're meeting those needs. And then as far as opening up another section at a site, I guess we'd have to have conversations about how to orderly do that, because for every, I don't know how to describe this, right? For every section of returning of in-person that we opened, there was the ripple effect disruption. And I think that's what the parent was alluding to, in the fact that we were trying to balance that. I want to say, let's let the process play out a little bit, in the sense of seeing where we have capacity in other sites after trying to make sure we have accommodated each neighborhood school's prioritized students to try to engage learners. And then let me have, and then I guess we can circle back. And I'm hearing that third grade, Cumberland was the need. So maybe I can have a conversation with the principal about further evolution, but I think that's all I can commit to right now at this level, in the sense that we're trying to make sure we're bringing back the prioritized students at every site as best we can, in addition to accommodating the parents that requested the in-person from the December survey. So, and I have the name down as well, Glazer. So,
Okay, good.
Thank you.
And I'll just add about the other part of your question. We hear you that an extension of the school day would be ideal. We absolutely agree with you fully. And at this point, given all the circumstances and the health conditions and the ability to serve a certain number of students in the classroom, this is the best possible model to serve as many students as we feasibly can. If we could do different, we really would, and do hear you on wanting a full day for your children. I definitely understand that. As far as summer school is concerned and your question about timing, we also, just in the spirit of being a community, want to be mindful of our teachers who have been working this time and need to take a little bit of a break before they go back into teaching. So it was a combination of being respectful and responsive to our teachers, as well as our partnership with the Stanford program. We do work in partnership with them, and typically this is when we start, which is 2 weeks after the school year, to kind of coincide with their program as well. So those are the two reasons, but it really is a lot about also being responsive to our teachers. So this way we get a 2-week break right after school ends for a breather, and then a 2-week break before school begins. And I fully understand if you're doing long distance travel, it breaks it up. Just looking at the larger needs, in taking those into consideration, is what we plan the schedule on. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kristen Kuramoto, then Asha, and then Linda J. And it's notifying me I need to actually promote Kristen. So I'll move you over.
Hi. Question about summer school. So is it going to be invitation only as it has been in the past? Are you opening it up to larger enrollment? And if you don't know yet, when will you be able to tell parents? Thank you.
Ms. Ahuja, do you want to take that one?
Yes, about summer school enrollment. So we are doing it in tiers, and we've sent out the first round of invitations. And then as we get responses back, we'll send out a second round of invitations to parents. We still do have some spaces available, but it's going to take us the month of April to really do targeted outreach and invites.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Linda J., then Karen Boyman, then David Brutman.
Hi, I'm a parent of a third grader and a kindergartner at Cherry Chase, and they're both in person, which has been really great. So we're really happy about that. But my kindergartner, he really struggled to learn on virtual, and I'm hoping he's going to be in the summer school program. So one question I had was I responded to the paperwork that came, but I haven't heard back yet. So I'm wondering when I would hear a confirmation that he was enrolled. And then the second thing is that I think that's going to be great if he's in summer school, but I think he's going to need more support in the fall. So I'm wondering, is there anything planned yet for kids who are still behind, especially he's going to be in first grade and is going to need extra support, I think, for reading and writing and just with catch up there. Thank you.
Absolutely, great questions. So the summer school, if you were sent out an invite already and you've sent in your registration form, you will get a letter saying that your child's spot is confirmed. So we're not turning anyone away who got a first tier of invites. That should be taking place either in the next couple of days or the week we got back from spring break for sure. So I can assure you that if you got an invite, turned in the registration, your child is in. And the second part of your question was about next year. We're really aware of the fact that this pandemic has had, an adverse impact in so many different ways on so many different students, and especially the younger ones in particular, in terms of, their academic potential. So we are really pleased that we are going to be offering additional support in terms of an additional teacher that's going to provide services to students. Our focus target is on first and second grade at the elementary level, potentially sixth at the middle school level, really to provide this additional level of support that we know students are going to need. It's going to be academic, it's going to be social emotional, it's going to be a combination of all those. And in addition to the classroom teacher and the instructional coach that we already have and a cadre of other service providers, there's also going to be additional academic support provided. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Next up, we have Karen Boyman, then David Brutman, then DEO.
Yeah, thanks. My question is for Mr. Gallagher. In the conversation we had yesterday with a small forum of parents, we're talking about extending the 7th and 8th grades from 2 days to 4 days. Can you provide an update on that and elaborate?
Yes. So what we, and actually Ms. Ahuja alluded to this as well. We're hoping we're able to extend it to more days. As I said in the meeting yesterday, if we're just being as honest as we can be, we've got a better shot at that at Columbia Middle School because such a low percentage of students signed up to be on campus. So I think it's like less than 30% of the 7th and 8th graders are going to be on campus. So we've got a better shot there than we do at Sunnyvale Middle School, although I was exchanging emails with the principal there and she's gonna, what she said is kind of a numbers game. At that school, more than 40% are interested in returning. And so as you know, I had a meeting with a group of parents yesterday and Karen was one of them. One of the things that I mentioned was one of the reasons that the high school district can return students is that their percentages of students returning are even lower. So 2 of their high schools are below 20% students returning, and the highest are like 30%, 31%, 32%. So with that few students on campus, kind of like Columbia, there's a better chance of being able to return the kids instead of just having them come 2 days to do the virtual in-person school. They can potentially do it 4 days. So once we get to April 19th and we're sure of the students who were there, the principals will make that assessment. So that's where we are on that.
Thank you. Next up, we have David Brutman, then DEO, and then Tiffany Anderson.
Thank you for taking my question. So I have a 6th grader at SMS that just went back to school today. It was a great experience for him to be in person, seeing his school for the first time and seeing the teachers and his classmates. But at the same time, we realized that this is going to be 2 days a week for 3 hours. And earlier this week, we kind of experienced firsthand what it means for the 2 other days, not to truly be supervised, but just essentially independent study. And I kind of wondered what drove this decision, because I'm just doing quick math. 3 hours out of the entire week is probably when you can probably fit like 4 different shifts, at least in those 3-hour time slots. So even if we're kind of looking at the percentage numbers, I was trying to understand what drove this decision of very minimal actual time at school. And also kind of looking at some of the other school districts and the way they handle it, seems like they were able to accommodate longer days. So I wanted to kind of understand the context of the decision, if there is a plan to try and enhance the days. because essentially it's kind of a step forward, but at the same time it's a step back, because the days that he's not in school or the second half of the day, it's very light supervision. Essentially, it's independent study if we look at it kind of net-net.
Thank you. Ms. Ahuja, do you want to address kind of the evolution of the 6th grade program, how we got to that?
I'm happy to try. It definitely looks different at both schools. The 6th grade, initial 6th grade model was to be there for 4 days. And that did change based on the expanded offering to more students being able to be accommodated. And as a result of that, I don't have the exact math, to do exactly what the R's and the numbers and the teachers and the students. But with about 40% of the students coming back, it wasn't feasible with all the health and safety guidelines in place to be able to accommodate that schedule. So the model is available, if conditions do change, and if there is a way to increase it. That's what the principal is working on, because we know and we agree that would definitely be the preferred option to be able to invite as many students as possible for as many days as possible, which would be 4 days a week.
Thank you. Next up, we have D.O., then Tiffany Anderson, and then Maya.
I have 3 questions. I'd like to ask them and then get the answer along the way. I just want to make sure that the meeting immediately after this is not a repeat of this meeting, but instead is with a different set of administrators. Is that correct?
What's the meeting after this one?
I believe it's for SMS specific, but I just want to Okay, good. I'm wondering when my student's going to find out what if she's in the A or B group for returning to school. She's asking me daily. I've seen no communications on when the list will come out. We don't have the list or anything related to that. So when are we going to get informed?
So that would be a good question for the Sunnyvale Middle School.
I will ask that. Then I want you as a district to know that the communication isn't happening.
Okay.
And third, I sat in a meeting a week ago where the reopening plans for the middle school was shown. I even asked a question, was addressed to a presentation, and it was not at all mentioned. And I got no emails that I could find that said we were losing 2 instructional days, which is today and tomorrow, as the teachers figure out how to return to the classroom. And I'm stumped why they aren't doing this next week. Or if they need more pay, they can go in on the weekend and you can pay them with all the money that my taxes is paying from the Fed and from the state. And I don't know, this district seems to have a problem planning and communicating. I don't know if you need to hire a really competent program manager like I have at work that drives us and makes sure things happen and gets things get on track. But how was that missed a week ago is not part of the plan that we released 2 more instructional days.
Thanks, David. I was on the email string between you and the principal earlier today, where she explained to you that you received that information. And so, again, I think you can have more conversation about that in the Sunnyvale Middle School meeting after this one.
Thank you. Then we have 4 hands left. We have Tiffany Anderson, Ray Molly, Rebecca Lucky, and Wakana.
Hi, thank you. I have a daughter who started in person at SMS this week. And overall, our transition went really well. Minus there was a tech issue on the second day where we weren't able to pull up the screening. And so there was some, worrying about that, but the paper filling out worked out just fine. And everyone that I've spoken to is pleased as well. Their kids are very happy to be back, loving the fact that they get to see other kids get out of the house away from their parents. We all know that this age level is starting that independence, right? That responsibility. And that is the part that they're missing when they're doing virtual. And I can't stress that part enough as an educator, that yeah, it might be working academically, the kids might be showing progress in grades, but they're losing those social things that they need from school, that they can only get from school. And so let's keep fighting for our kids to get more days. And along that line of thinking, I was thinking about the fact that I have a high schooler, so I'm also dealing with the FUHSD. And we're now 4 days, starting the 19th. And as you mentioned, yeah, their percentages are less. But when you look at the amount of kids that are in a classroom versus what would be in a classroom at SMS, and especially in the elementary level, the ratio wise, you're still pretty similar. So we should still be able to do 4 days. So I guess what I'm wondering is, there is definitely, you've been adjusting your conversation, that 7th and 8th graders you mentioned today might be able to go for 4 days. Are we also considering this for the 6th graders? And how would this be done if we do that? And how will it be communicated to the parents? Thank you again for doing these webinars. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Ms. Ahuja, you want to try that one again? It's kind of the same answer, I think. So for 6th grade, the principal, they're looking at the master schedules. Master schedules are much more complicated in elementary school than they are in middle school. So they're looking at the numbers of students they have. The first thing they're trying to do is lengthen the day. So individual days, make them for a longer period of time, find ways to do that. For example, one of the principals talked about, well, maybe we can have PE in person, and all the PE teachers will be back on April 19th. So that's a possibility, to start lengthening the school days, to look at the electives to see if those can be done either in person or virtually while the kids are at school. So those are things that the principals are looking at. And then the possibility of going the other way to 4 days is a little bit more challenging in the 6th grade, but they haven't given up on anything. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Ms. Ahuja, I see you're nodding.
No, I'm agreeing with you. We really are trying, and the principals are trying as well as the teachers, to see the possibility of either extending the day or expanding the offerings. So that is work in progress. And I just want to address a couple of questions that were asked earlier about the communication. Dear, you mentioned that the communication had been received, and I understand that you should have got it by now. I think it went out about half an hour ago. So if you haven't heard for 7th or 8th grade what your cohort is, whether it's in A or B, please do make sure you check in again, because apparently the communications have just been disseminated a little while ago.
Thank you, Ms. Ahuja. Next up, we have Ray Molly, then Rebecca Lucky, and then Wakana.
Great, guys. Thank you so much. So first of all, I did want to thank you for holding these forums. I know it's never easy to be on the other side and get these, hard questions, but we have to raise these issues because we are on the receiving end as well for the past year. So I have 2 children. One is in 3rd grade, one is in 6th grade. And in all transparency, I opted to put the 6th grader in private school because of the situation. And, I do see what's going on in the private school. They opened up tents, they got creative. I know that's not something that's easy, and it's something that's easy to do when you are, when you have a small population of kids. But first of all, I wanted to understand what is driving the not reopening for 4 days. Is it the distance? Is it 6 feet? Is it 3 feet? Can we be creative and think of other ideas? I mean, we are living in California. It's not, I grew up on the East Coast. You cannot hold a class in 30 degrees Fahrenheit, but here we live in California. There are other ways that we can have in-person instruction. And, for the burden on the, not only the kids, and parents have said this time and time again, but the social emotional part is so important. It's critical. It's vital. My 3rd grader returned back to Cherry Chase Elementary. He was skipping to class. I can't even tell you, how extremely excited he was to see people, to see three-dimensional people, and to actually see his teacher. But for parents, working parents like me, and this has been said, but I just want to re-echo this, to drop the kid off at 8 o'clock and then pick him up 2.5 hours later, it's nearly impossible. And I have almost forgotten him because the balance between work and life is nearly impossible. So I wanted to ask, first of all, what is driving the low amount of kids that could go into the class? And second of all, and this, again, this is an open-ended question. I don't expect you guys to think about this now, but can we get creative with the offerings of having more kids in a certain space and allow more children to return? Thank you.
So at the 7th and 8th grade levels, the issue is just the numbers. And as we said, we're going to look at that. As I said, the better chance at Columbia Middle School because of the relatively low number of students who are returning. Both principals are looking at that. It is space in the classroom. That's part of it. I mean, actually, that's the biggest piece of it.
And we actually had a few more people raise their hands, so we actually still have 5 hands raised left. So we have Rebecca Lucky, then Wakana, and then Orly Mulla. Rebecca Lucky, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me
There we
now?
go.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks. I just have a couple of questions and then probably just a couple of comments. So I understand the whole summer school program. I'm just wondering, it's not a full day of school. So I'm just trying to piece together how that is going to be addressed for full return in the fall when it's only a half a day. And then how our tier, like if we go back into different tiers again, where it's saying if your school wasn't already open, then you can't open it. How is that going to be addressed? Because from what I understand, there's still going to be cluster events and other things that will happen. And so I just want to make sure, is the county education office, are they going to offer waivers or something like that that we're going to apply for? And then I resonated with one of the other speakers about the summer school and the academic performance. And I don't think, a couple of weeks of a half day summer school is going to quote unquote recover the students in their academic performance. And so I wanted to understand what's the plan for after school programs or even next summer to catch up children. And then I would just say that I have a kindergartner and a second grader that goes to San Miguel, and they're part of the SLG Plus program. And when my kids return home every day, they do not talk about how their Zoom was at school. They talk about their interactions with a teacher in person. They talk about the friends that they've made, but they absolutely do not talk about anything that they've done on Zoom. And so I do not think Zoom is of value. And that's, again, why I'm so curious as to how, if, again, there's cluster events where the school needs to close down, we're going to return to Zoom. And it's not, again, of any value to at least my kids on that front.
Thank you, Rebecca. So I can tell you, as far as the county is concerned, all of our schools are open. So I don't know that they're going to continue that practice. The governor said he's going to remove the tiers on June 15th in any case. Even if they were to continue it, our schools are considered to be open. So we wouldn't have to, we were forced to close again, we're already open. So I don't know if that answers that question. There could be cluster events. My guess is that as we move into the fall, it would be more once a school is open and there's a positive case, there are protocols, and I'm not the expert on them, but there are protocols for a student being quarantined, kids in a class being quarantined, or if there's enough students on a campus, that the campus is then quarantined. And then if there's enough schools in a district, then that district is closed. That's how it works. That would be pretty extreme if it were to get to that with a even a district the size of ours, that would mean there'd be a lot of infection in our community. So I don't envision that. But I don't know, we're going kind of down a hypothetical there. What our intent is to open to the greatest extent allowable under the law in the fall. So that's what we're going to be doing. And if they ask us to close temporarily, it'll be temporarily. And so there were some other questions about the summer school program and then moving into next year for recovery, if either Tasha or Mala want to answer those.
Absolutely, I can definitely talk. So first of all, I want to say I'm so happy to hear that your children are excited about their experience in the SLG Plus and coming in person. We all know that there's nothing that can beat in-person interactions. So that's awesome. I do remember even when my son was in school, a regular full-day school, the only thing we talked about was what happened at recess and lunch. So that's pretty normal, right, for elementary students. I mean, that's the most exciting part, is that interpersonal piece. So that's great to hear. Summer school is going to be more of that. So we're excited about that possibility. And we have, added in opportunities for just engagement and movement in addition to the academic piece, which is very important. But we know students have to also be excited and engaged and want to be there for them to learn. And to just repeat what I had mentioned earlier about the fact that we are very aware and cognizant of the fact that students are going to need some recovery, a lot of recovery for some. And we have plans in place to provide that additional academic support in the position of a teacher who's going to be working with small groups to provide additional instructional opportunities for students at all our different sites. So we definitely are being considerate about, what the potential is, and have taken steps to start addressing that. Will the summer be enough? Definitely not. Will a whole year be enough? Probably not. It would take even more than that. Unfortunately, we've been a district who has continuously, over the last, as many years as I can remember, which is a lot of years for me in Sunnyvale, offered summer school every single year. Through the downturns, through the times when there was recessions, we've always had our focus on supporting students with an extended school year. So don't see that changing next year or the year after that as well. So thank you for your questions.
Yeah, and the only thing I want to add is that in addition to the emphasis we talked about is the communication piece. We want to hear from our families and our community because we don't know everything. So the more we're engaged and we're hearing from families, if there's some changes and some shifts that we can make, that's what we're trying to do. So the communication is really key, and we appreciate those who have communicated today as well.
Thank you.
So I think Ms. Wilson, we're coming up on the hour, but we have 4 new people. So I think we should take those 4, even if we go over.
Okay, sounds good. So next up we have Wakana, then Orly, then Uri, and then Victoria. Wakana, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself. Vakana.
Hello?
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Yes. Thank you so much for taking my question. Really appreciate this opportunity. And I've got actually a 4th grader, 6th grader, and 7th grader. I have a question with specifically relating to the middle school. And as we are returning back to school and planning for the fall, my family is just wondering what kind of parameter of capacity are we operating under, particularly with respect to human resource and space perspective. So my questions are, first of all, have there been analysis done as to what the school day would look like if all students decide to come back? I believe that the guideline of 3 feet will continue to be in place for a while. Well, that's what I'm guessing. And so with that, if all students are not able to return and stay within the 3 feet distance within a school classrooms, then we're wondering there continue to be this sort of A day, B day, or some sort of hybrid type of scenario. The second question is, from a human resource perspective, have there been any analysis or survey done as to how many teachers are intending to return to the fall? I know this is a little bit far away, so if that survey has not been done, I'm just curious to see if how many have returned as of right now. Thank you.
I'll take the first one and maybe Mr. Nishihara can take the second one. So the first one is we're doing analysis, and actually Mr. Smiley, our Chief Operations Officer, is kind of doing classroom size analysis and see how many students we can fit safely in rooms, even under those constraints of the 3 feet, which could be relaxed by the time we get to fall. And the short answer is we're going to make it work, right? So we're going to make it work so that we're not on A days and B days when we come back. So if it means that we have to load classrooms with fewer students and hire more teachers, that's what we're going to do. Our initial analysis is that we won't have to do that much, if at all. There may be a few spots where we have to do it, but we're not going to let that be a constraint. We're fortunate that we have classrooms. The only school that's kind of more of a challenge is Sunnyvale Middle School in terms of size, but that school's actually gotten small. It's gotten a little bit less enrollment from its peak. So I think we should be able to accomplish that without having to hire many more teachers. And the goal is to do it without going to an A day and a B day. I don't know, Mr. Smiley, do you want to add anything to that, or did I kind of capture it?
No, Mike, captured very well what we've been looking at as far as the spacing between desks. There's various configurations that teachers would be able to utilize. I mean, including even having kids face one another to have it be a little more of a collaborative environment and still maintain the reduced guidance that is currently recommended. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there may be some constraints to the configurations. But even with that, as Mr. Smiley said, there's some flexibility. 3 feet between students is actually not a lot. It's a little bit more than we normally would do. We wouldn't think about it, but it's not a huge amount of space, which is why some parents are still a little bit reluctant to send their kids back. But we're going to make it work. So to the human resources question, Mr. Nishihara.
Yes, so Wakana's her instincts are correct. And so I would say it's less of an analysis and more of a process, because we are right in the middle of hiring season right now. Ms. Ahuja alluded to some of the additional staffing that we're trying to bring into play next year. So we're in the process of hiring. And so we're kind of in weekly conversations with school sites, both regarding their certificated and classified employees, to make sure that we know who's returning next year. So it's less of, hey, are you returning? Because teachers are on a year-long contract. And then we go kind of through that analysis and making sure we have, based off on our enrollment, enough staffing per grade level in order to execute that. So this is also the time, though, where we receive formal resignations and or retirement. So we're watching that very carefully. And those are brought to each board meeting. And so we are right in the middle of that process. So I can say we are busily hiring for next year again, because Sunnyvale, I feel pretty fortunate in the sense that we're able to kind of maintain and increase staffing, even as our enrollment declines, as our demographers report has shown, to make sure that we have staff to meet those requirements. So again, yes, we are in the process of ensuring we have staff to meet our in-person needs next year, both on the classified and certificated side. So.
Thank you. So next up we have Orly, and then Uri, and then the last one is Victoria.
Hi, thank you. It's Ophir. I'm using just my spouse phone. My name is Ophir. Oh. I wanted to put a few points and please help me to understand if I'm stating something wrong. The CDC guideline are allowing today 3 feet between students, right? It's a fact that was published by the CDC. The state adopted the CDC guideline that are allowing 3 feet between students. the schedule was set based on 6 feet between students, based on how the school district said it. The survey that we as parents got was not mentioning any distance between students. It was set as if condition will allow. So if I'm doing very simple logic, and if my statements are correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the only thing that is now making the principal life harder in order to find creative solution to increase the number of hours of having more students in class is the fact that the school district is the only one that didn't adopted the 3 feet distance. I'll be happy to be corrected if the only challenge is right now is the fact that the school district that claimed that maybe in August, the distance will be even shorter than 3 feet, right? This is the hope that right now Dr. Gallagher just mentioned. Right now, it looks like that the only thing that blocks us from offering more hours and letting more kids in classroom is the rule that the district set. Please help me to understand if I'm wrong.
Thank you. So the additional piece of information is that many of our families that are back at 6 feet would likely not be comfortable coming back at 3 feet. As I mentioned, that's pretty close. And even a small number would mean that we would have to reconfigure classes yet again. And what the number one piece of feedback that we're getting from families is a want or a need for consistency right now, and something that they can count on. And so that really is the issue. So in some school districts, which are just starting now, or just starting in the last week, that hadn't already had a reopening plan, didn't already have kids back, and they're also doing a different model where they're doing Zoom in the room. Like, so those they're asking families now, do you want to do this particular program? And if they don't, then those families stay home. We already have families that have already started. So that's the difference. And it would cause us to have to reconfigure classes again. And again, that's the number one thing we hear from families is a want for consistency to finish the school year.
Okay, next up we have Uri and then Victoria.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, my name is Uri. I have a 4th grader and an 8th grader in SMS in Cherry Chase. You know, we've been going back and forth on this expanding the reopening, you know, both of, you know, the idea of unifying the AM and PM in elementary and expanding to 4 days in middle school. And, you know, as we went along with this conversation, the excuses always change. We started with teachers are very sensitive people. Then we talked about the MOUs that are mentioning the 6 feet, right? And then we talked about consistency and continuity, and that parents do not agree to 3 feet. So these excuses kept coming. And I want to say something about consistency and continuity. I think that it's very important to be consistent on certain things, you know, like following the law, you know, caring for our children. That's where I expect you to be consistent. But consistency doesn't mean being constant. It doesn't mean standing in one place and not being agile and not adapting to the situation, right? And as Ophir said, the distancing guidelines have changed. I don't know what this is based on, that parents are afraid of the 3 feet. Which parents are you talking to? This is the community forum, right? So I'd like to understand, and as I told you yesterday, Mr. Gallagher, what if parents wanted to learn less math? Would we also accommodate that? I mean, in-person instruction is a superior way of instruction. That's what the state says, right? And even if parents are, you know, they have the option to go back to Zoom, right? That's the second thing, if they are so afraid of the 3 feet, which is a CDC guideline, right? That's what is allowed. The second thing I wanted to say is that our confidence in the ability of the district to go back in person in the fall keeps going down, because all of the issues that you're mentioning now, what is going to be different in the fall, I mean, there's still going to be some parents, maybe a few, that will not be comfortable with 3 feet, right? There will be all these issues will still remain. It will only be worse because we're talking about full, everyone going back, right? So when we're saying in middle school, we have a problem that there's more, students coming back than in high school, this is going to get worse in the fall, right? So what is so different between now and the fall? And the last thing I want to say, I think it is, really shameful that some parents are in waiting lists. Really, this is something that is, it's unbelievable, really. I think that there are parents that would like to go back to in-person instruction in the current model, and you're not giving them equal opportunity like the rest of it. So what if in November they chose something? It doesn't mean anything. In other districts, they're enabling them to go back, even if they chose something different back in some November survey. It's just unbelievable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tal.
So should we go ahead and move on to Victoria? Okay, Victoria, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. So actually, I am the one who is on the wait list. I have 2 daughters at Cumberland. One is on 4th grade, just got back to school today. I asked the principal at Cumberland and also the board that make it possible for my 3rd grader going back in person as well. So there is a wait list at 3rd grade. The principal said she can't do anything. I really don't understand why you are not open for our requests. So surely all the families who want their kids back in person have good reasons for that. Anybody who has children can imagine how confused I feel. My 4th grader got back to school in person for 2.5 hours today. She made it. She got home happy. She enjoyed in-person class and also seeing other kids and playing with them. But what about the other child who also would like to go back in person, but she can't? Can you imagine that as the mother, how I feel? I want the best for both of them. The kids suffered enough that they weren't able to go to school for months, couldn't see their teachers, classmates, or their friends. Why do you want to punish them? Take from them what would be so important for them now. You are talking about equity, but how can be there equity if we don't even have that in my family? One of my daughter can go back, the others not. You are talking about reopening in fall. You are focusing that, but it's time to go back now. So go back in person for everyone who wants it. No, that is safe. Now is the time, not in fall, not in the future. We all know so many things can happen until August. You have the choice, you have the resources. What do you need that you are able to let all the kids who want in person get back to school? What resources do you need to make it possible to let all the kids on the wait list back in person school? Is it money? Is it personal? What? Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Mr. Nishar, I think there was another question about 3rd grade before. Is that what you were gonna?
Yeah, so I was going to say, yes, I've noted again, 3rd grade. And I just want to, I'm glad she brought up equity in the sense that I just want to remind everyone that from that chart, our priorities are identified from the state, from the return. And I know there are wait lists of individuals that vary by school site. And so we are trying to clear break and see what opportunities we have. But the school sites, in addition to implementing their return of the K1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grade levels, given the state priority on English learners, students with special needs, foster youth, et cetera, we've been trying to utilize that outreach, and there could be opportunities then for other in-person options utilizing different district processes. But again, I have noted the fact that there seems to be a quote growing wait list at Cumberland 3rd grade, and we'll be checking in with the principal on potential opportunities as we talk about being continuing to evolve. Again, I want to make it very clear that there are other variables involved, in the sense that I think Dr. Gallagher touched on it. Every section we created in the caused some reshuffling, which again, as we heard in the last board meeting as well, there were a couple of parents voicing concerns about the, what is that called? The impact on the virtual program as well. So we're again trying to balance all of those needs, and I'm committing to follow up with the Cumberland principal either tomorrow or immediately after following break. So.
Okay, there's actually two more people who raised their hand who haven't spoken yet. So we're going to make that the end, right? So Ken Look and Beatrice Bravo will be the last two. Oh, Ken Look disappeared.
Yes.
So
Beatrice.
You get the last word.
And I need to promote her to panelist. So Beatrice, if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for letting me speak. And also thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to address our concerns. I just wanted to I just wanted to say one more time, as I've heard the parents before me, that whoever decided to go back to in-person decided to go back under the guidelines of the CDC of the states. So if there's parents, and I don't know, because you haven't said already, how many parents are the ones who are concerned to going from 6 feet to 3 feet? We don't know numbers, but if there's families who are concerned to go to 3 feet, they can always go back to Zoom. But the ones who decided to go in person decided to go under the guidelines of the CDC, and they are now allowing us to be 3 feet distant. So again, what I wanted to say, if we need to make this possible to the greatest extent, and that means making it possible now, not in the fall. Our kids have already suffered so much, and they have lost so much. Why are we waiting to give them the opportunity to be happy, to be, like they said, their well-being, their emotional well-being, their social well-being, not only their learning aspect? So we all, and I mean we, the community, the districts, the teachers, and the families who are here for a reason, because we want to work together to make this happen. So no more excuses. We need to make it to the greatest extent possible, like the county says, now, not in the fall, yesterday. It needs to happen for all of our kids who need like a joy in their life after all this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, everyone. Thank you for all your comments and for your questions. All I can say is we're going to keep making progress. We haven't stopped. We haven't stopped making adjustments. It's actually not what anyone wants. I was going to say it's not what everyone wants. It's actually not what anyone wants, the situation that we're in right now. But we are committed to moving forward to a full reopening on August 18th. We're committed to the most comprehensive summer school program we've ever had, and we're committed to continuing to adjust and to make what we have left of this school year as valuable and meaningful as we possibly can as well. So with that, I want to thank you. I want to thank my team for staying late and answering questions, and wish everyone a good evening. So thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.